Scrutiny from Congress of Special Counsel John Durham's probe is where we begin today with Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He served as an impeachment manager for the second Trump impeachment. You know a whole lot about not just the body of evidence that was unearthed by DOJ's special counsel investigation into the Trump campaign's shared mission with Russia, but also the Senate did an incredibly exhaustive investigation. The bulwark against everyone looking at Trump and his ties to Russia, his campaign's shared mission with Vladimir Putin's, was always Durham. Privately and publicly, it was the Durham probe. They were going to go get everyone that was actually trying to protect U.S. national security. What do you make of the reporting that suggests that investigation collapsed on its own, lack of a legitimate predicate?
Good evening, Nicole. It's clear to me that there remains a Putin bloc in the Republican Party because, as you said, it's easy to go down a rabbit hole of the process here. You know, there's an investigation and an investigation into the investigation and more investigations. But at the end of the day, we investigated Russia because in 2016, they attacked our democracy. Donald Trump asked them to do it. Once they started doing it, he welcomed it. And when he became president, he drew us closer to Russia than any American president ever has, and he has not left them since. So Durham's quest to undo the Russia investigation was a quest, again, to validate what Russia did and to hold up Vladimir Putin. That's what this is about, and to essentially now learn that he found nothing. People quit out of protest, and shocker, this thing ended up taking them toward Donald Trump's financial entanglements with Russia, just shows that the Republican Party is absolutely determined to side with Russia, too many Republicans, to side with Russia over American values and over the real fight that's happening right now, the war in Ukraine with democracy being on the line. That's the bigger picture of what's going on here and what it means to everyday folks.
Yeah, I mean, you make a great point. I think it's confusing what happened at DOJ, right? So you have regular Justice Department. It was run by Jeff Sessions and then Mr. Barr. And then there was the Mueller investigation, which was separate because Mr. Sessions didn't think he could oversee that investigation. But then Bill Barr comes and he appoints Durham to basically investigate the Mueller investigation. The only person that played a referee was the IG, the Inspector General. And while Trump weakened a lot of them, he liked Mr. Horowitz. Mr. Horowitz was very hard on Jim Comey. He was very hard on Mr. McCabe. And he looked at all this. And he said that the Russia investigation was a righteous investigation. The predicate was justified. You who attacked him, Mr. Durham. Should that have been a red flag that something was not above board inside the Durham probe?
Yes, absolutely. It should have, raised all of us to be concerned that the Durham probe, again, was just an effort to erase the history that Donald Trump had with Russia when he was a candidate and then ultimately as president. And that's, the goal here. Again, the Republicans, they are Putin curious. They continue to hold him up, as a strong man, and they try and own Biden and the liberals, by suggesting our military should look like Russia's. By the way, Ted Cruz did that. So the Durham probe was always just the vehicle to undermine any issues around the last election. And finally, if there was any failure of imagination or failure of the Mueller probe, it was really a failure of prior Congresses to imagine that a person like Donald Trump would ask for Russia's help, would benefit from it, and would never turn it down or disavow it. And we didn't write criminal laws that Mueller could have used to say that was bad. We should do that now going forward. And Adam Schiff and myself have written legislation that would make that illegal. But that was the only failure, was that we didn't imagine someone like Donald Trump would ever choose Russia over democracy.
They're going to regret kicking you guys off your committees. Let me ask you about that. I mean, Pete Strzok was just on in the last hour and made this point that Durham didn't just unearth evidence of alleged criminality by Donald Trump from a tip from the Italians. Durham unearthed evidence of criminality on the part of Donald Trump in the specific area of financial crimes. We are always back to where we started, looking for evidence of potential financial criminality. It was Trump's red line, with Mr. Mueller. And here we have one more. This one is a prosecutor who put himself on Team Barr and Team Trump, so we didn't know about it at the time. But do you think there's still unanswered questions about Trump's finances?
Yeah, Nicole, the ceiling of the Mueller investigation was a financial inquiry into Donald Trump's history dealing with Russia. And by the way, his sons had bragged that, much of their financing was coming from Russia, and Donald Trump had wanted to invest in a Trump Tower in Russia, before the 2016 election. And so who the hell knows what's, above that ceiling, what's on that financial floor that involves Donald Trump's finances, because Mueller wasn't allowed to go there. And it looks like Durham, as you would imagine, if he looked there, would find something. And so if there's an ongoing investigation into that, I hope that is the case. And I can just promise you this: Merrick Garland will give this a much more honest inquiry than Bill Barr or anyone else at the Department of Justice in the Trump years ever did.
Is that Merrick Garland's obligation? I mean, Mr. Durham works for Merrick Garland. Does Merrick Garland owe the public a seal of approval that he has examined and vetted for prosecutorial misconduct, that he's brought Nora Dennehy in? She quit over an ethical disagreement with Mr. Durham.
Merrick Garland's obligation is to follow the facts and apply the law, wherever the facts take him. And if Durham found evidence of financial dealings between Donald Trump and Russia that are against the law, then I hope Merrick Garland, would go there, because others weren't allowed to or weren't willing to. But again, I'll wait, just as any responsible person of the public should, for what Merrick Garland finds. But there's a crescendo of evidence that's about to drop on Donald Trump. That's clear in these grand juries in Georgia, New York, federal inquiries that are taking place. And this may be a part of what's to come.
So your colleagues, Congressman Lieu and Goldman, have asked the DOJ IG, that's Michael Horowitz, he's been in that job a long time, to look into and open an IG investigation into the Durham probe. Is that adequate? Or would you like to see a special counsel appointed to investigate the special counsel that investigated the special counsel looking into Russia?
I think they're right on. And again, we just have to articulate to the American people what this is really about. This is about a country that wants, to tear down our democracy, tear us apart as people, and overseas in Ukraine is brutally attacking innocent people. Russia is not our friend. Republicans continue to want to side with Russia, but this is about recognizing Russia, as, the constant, persistent, bully on the world stage in our democracy worldwide. And so it's time that we start defending our country. And the Durham probe was only meant, again, to validate what Russia did in 2016. And the American people should see their democracy defended, not Russia validated.
We saw you on the eve of the political retaliation that Kevin McCarthy either planned for you or had to trade away to win the speakership after 16, 15 votes. Tell me about you're still in the Judiciary Committee. You mentioned writing legislation with Congressman Schiff. We talked about the threat environment against you at the time. Tell me what has happened in the intervening days since that political retribution has taken place.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. Yes, I serve on the Judiciary Committee as well as the Homeland Security Committee, and I miss the Intelligence Committee and the professionals in the community. But as I told you before, it may mean more diapers to be changed at home and more kid pickup drop-offs. But I'm not going away. And I'm working with my colleagues on 25 to 30 different congressional districts that we are going to compete in and win to make sure Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans are the shortest ever Republican majority. So, yes, I'm not going away. Mr. Schiff's not going away. The threat environment has stayed the same for me and my family. But if the goal is to silence me, that's not going to happen because this is still America, and I still believe in it. And again, it will be redeemed, and it's just going to take some time.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you for starting us off on all these stories. We're grateful.